Hi, in this next episode, we're going to talk about the Fdisk utility. This is a utility that is used to manage disk partitions. Whenever you're working with a new storage device, there's a few steps that need to be taken in order for you to start using that storage device. The first is actually managing the partitions which is on the device. By default, every disk you are allowed to section off into different partitions to keep different type of data. And the utility that's used to create those partitions, well, one of the more common ones is Fdisk. Whether your storage device is using a BIOS firmware or a UEFI firmware, meaning they have two different types of partitioning schemes, you can still use Fdisk to create and manage those disk partitions. Some very basic commands that you're going to use with Fdisk are fdisk -L to actually list partitions on a certain disk, and to start opening and editing the partitioning table, you can simply type fdisk followed by the disk itself, which is going to be found in DEV. So here you see DEV, and SDX is again an example of a name that a disk might have. Based on the type of hardware you're using, whether that disk is NVMe or IDE or SCSI, you might be given a different name, but of course, rest assured, you are going to find that disk inside that DEV directory, and you can begin to edit and manage partitions on that disk. Some of the common operations, again, will be listed inside Fdisk inside the help menu, but you can type N to create a new partition, and you can delete partitions with the D. You can change partition type. You can print the partition table. And of course, you can save changes that you make to your partitioning table. Now, all of this will be discussed in the upcoming lab where we show how to use the Fdisk utility to create a new partition on a new disk so then you can have more storage space to use or to manage. Please join us in this next lab where we show you the practical side of using Fdisk to manage disk partitions. In this episode, we're going to talk about the Fdisk utility. The Fdisk utility allows you to manage storage devices on your Linux system. So for the purposes of this demo, I will actually add a second storage device through settings in my virtual machine manager. I'm going to click on add, and I'm going to add a new hard disk. I'll click next, and I'll choose the recommended disk type, create a new virtual disk, storing it as a single file, and I'll just say this new hard drive I'm adding is 10 GB. I'll click on finish, and I'll actually restart my system here so that new hard disk is in play. Now, the process of working with storage starts with Fdisk itself. Fdisk allows you to create and manage partitions on a storage device. And this can help if you want to, again, segregate important pieces of data. If you want to treat other, certain data separately based on permissions, access, file system type, a lot of other factors will go into that. Now, I'm going to log in and show you around how to use Fdisk in order to manage partitions. The first thing you should understand is all your actual hard disks are stored and accessible through the file system, actually, inside the DEV folder. So I'm typing a ls command on the DEV directory, and I'll actually point out where our new disk is. So this is our original disk called SDA, and you can see it actually have already two partitions, which is part of the Linux installation. It is supposed to separate the boot files outside of the actual normal system in case you need to repair the boot directory or fix the booting of the system. And then we have our new disk, which we just added here, the SDB disk. So the disk we're actually working with is SDB. All right. Now, in order to use Fdisk, first things first, you need to be using a root user because this is hardware level changes. You should be elevating your permission before actually managing anything through Fdisk. Now, Fdisk itself is an interactive utility. However, from here, I can type certain commands, such as fdisk -l, to list the drive itself, and it shows me that this is 10 GB, this many bytes, it have this many sectors, this is the disk model, how many sectors of how many units, input-output size, giving me all the information about the actual disk itself. Now, when I'm ready to partition it, I can type fdisk followed by the device name. And here we can see welcome to Fdisk. We can make changes to this and simply create new partitions on it. Let me type M for help so you can see the different commands that are available in Fdisk when working with a disk. So commands, the generic commands, of course, it's creating partitions, deleting partitions, listing the known partitions, printing the table, changing partition type, verify the partition table, printing information. So you can see that, of course, this is used for managing partitions in all kinds of ways. So over here, we can see commands based on DOS type partitions. All right, down here, we can see that you can even have GPT type partitions. So these are partitioning schemes based on the actual hardware architecture. Although we're in a virtualized environment, we're still having a certain type of hardware architecture, be it virtualized. Now, when you make your changes and create your partitions, you can save with W, quit without saving, and things like that. So what I will do is type N for new, and I'll create a new partition. It's going to ask me whether I want to create a primary partition or an extended partition, and I'll type P for primary. And here I have 4 available where it's going to start at the default number 1, and I can name the partition all the way from 1 to 4. I'll choose the default number 1 simply by pressing Enter. And the first sector, of course, is going to begin at that first area of the disk. So I'm going to say start there, don't skip anything. And the last sector, I can add the total size of this partition. So I can put a plus over here, plus 5 capital G for a 5G partition. So you can see I've created one partition of type Linux and size 5 GB. If I am satisfied with this, I can save the changes with W. I can even make other partitions, N for new, again, P for primary, again. Now the default number you can see is 2. So we'll choose 2. And you can see now the first sector actually starts where that last one ended. So I'm going to press Enter. And for this one, I'm going to say plus 1 capital G. This is a smaller partition of 1 GB. And again, this is of type Linux. If I want to change the type, I can type T to change the partition type and say I want to change it for partition 2. So I'll just press Enter for the default selection. And here you can see the hex code for different partition types. So let's type 0 is unwise. Okay, so let's try to change it again. T, partition 2, and type L to see all the codes. So here you can see all the different ways you can set this partition up. And of course, some of these are meant to be used cross-platform, such as Mini-X, which is really used on Apple systems, Windows 95, FAT32, exFAT, these are Windows type systems, AIX is Unix type systems. So you can create storage that can potentially be mounted on other platforms because of the partition type that you set here. So down here, we can choose one, or I'm actually going to set this as a swap partition. So I'll type 82. And I've changed this to 82. If we type P, we can see our 2 partitions. P for print, and we can see how big each one is. This one is 5G of type Linux. This one is 1G of type swap. And if we're, again, happy with these changes, we can press W to then save and quit out of Fdisk. One useful and something that I would recommend you do not forget is, after finishing, typing part probe. And what part probe is doing is updating the partition table on my system with these new changes that I just made. Now, if you observe, I can actually view these partitions using Fdisk -L, and you can see the two partitions I have a little bit above on SDB. What partitions I have. This is 10G, and we have SDB1 and SDB2, the same information we were watching it. One other tool that you can use is the lsblk command. Again, this lets us know about the partition itself. And again, we can see partition on SDA is already in use. That's where I installed Linux. But partition B is one we just created using Fdisk. I'll close this episode here. I encourage you to practice creating partitions using Fdisk, as this is an essential system admin skill. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.